is Father Ignatius Mazanowski. I'm the pastor here at St. John Vianney. I'm also the rector at the Chapel of the Holy Cross. Thank you so much for coming out tonight as we have this parish forum with Catholic Charities as we continue to look at the possibility of doing workforce housing here at our parish. We began this discussion over a year ago now, about 15 months ago, and we've had a number of discussions with Catholic Charities. And tonight is another opportunity for the parish to engage in that discussion and hopefully to learn some more about what we're possibly going to do, and also to ask questions and get whatever answers you are looking for. I'd like to welcome the president of Catholic Charities in Phoenix, Paul Mulligan. Also tonight we have Steve Capelburis, who's here. He's the housing director for Catholic Charities, and so it's great to have both of them here. I'm going to pass it to them now, and then I'll share a little bit more later. As you see on your agendas, we also will have some time and discussion and at our tables, and there'll be a question and answer time, and then a closing prayer. So thank you again for being here tonight, and I'm going to pass it to Paul now.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you. I'm Paul Mulligan, President and CEO of Catholic Charities Community Services. We're the charitable outreach arm of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Phoenix. We have a service area, we'll talk about all that, but it's really a pleasure to be with you tonight. A little closer? Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of try and keep us on track here with just a little lead-in about Catholic Charities. The organization that we're talking about here is a partner with St. John Vianney, so I'll go through a few things on the slides, and then I'm going to let you go. So first of all, our mission, Catholic Charities, we work with our community's most vulnerable, and we really work with them right on their path to permanent solutions. So this whole idea of kind of helping people, you hear about hand out versus hand up. This is kind of a little combination. We meet people where they are, and we walk with them. And they're vulnerable people. So we really want to help them realize their God-given potential. And a lot of the work that we do involves parish engagement like we're doing here tonight. I mentioned, the Diocese of Phoenix. Actually, on this map here, you got the whole state of Arizona. There's technically 3 Roman Catholic dioceses here. We've got Phoenix, which is central Arizona, kind of based in Maricopa County. We've got the Diocese of Tucson to our south. And up in the northeast corner, we've got the Diocese of Gallup, New Mexico. We actually serve in those other 2 dioceses too. So all of central and northern Arizona, including some of Tucson's territory technically. But we serve in these counties with 22 different programs. It's, as I say, the charitable service arm of the Catholic Church. So you kind of imagine Catholic Charities around the country, 167 other agencies that are like us, serving as the charitable outreach of their diocese. This is what the Catholic Church does in living out the Gospels. So this is our territory. We've got actual office locations. Of course, we're throughout Greater Phoenix. A lot of different programming down there in Maricopa County, central Arizona, if you will. But up north, we've actually got offices, Prescott, Cottonwood. We're in Flagstaff, Bullhead City. We now have an office in Page. We're working on some stuff in Kingman. So kind of good presence. And we're actually, even though we're not officed in all of those communities, we are physically present in a lot of communities across northern Arizona. Why we serve, it really just comes down to Matthew 25. You know the story. It's a beautiful story about Jesus really telling us he is in the least of our brothers and sisters, the people on the margins, the people that we walk by, that we don't see. Jesus is actually waiting for us there. And so that's kind of the big, right? That's the big call to action here for us, is to recognize the people in the margins, that we're all a big community. And so we have some great stories and things that we draw. Obviously, biblically based values, Catholic social and moral teaching, those are what really guide this agency. And I like this, we talk about serving people in need. We do it not because of their faith, but because of our faith. The interesting thing is we say, you don't have to be Catholic to serve at Catholic Charities. You don't have to be Catholic to be served, right? It's kind of a beautiful thing. I've really come to appreciate it. We like to talk about this Good Samaritan, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I know you know the story probably well, but I do think it's just worth understanding who we are, Catholic Charities, as a potential partner, right, when you work with us. Yeah, Samaritano. we have just a wonderful way about us. What I love about the story, again, you know the story, Jesus is asked this question essentially about what good must I do to get to heaven? That's the question. And, he's going back and forth. He's kind of being tested on this. And when you say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbors yourself. Well, the guy that's asking questions kind of says, okay, I get it, but tell me who my neighbor is. And he really wants to know who his neighbor is. They say because he wants to know who his neighbor also isn't. Who does he not have to care for? Who can he walk right by? Tell me who my neighbor is, and I'll love that person and go to heaven. But who are the ones I don't have to care about? And that's when Jesus launches into one of these most famous parables of, right, that we all know from the gospel. And he does talk about the priest going down the road, seeing the man that was, beaten up, mugged, left for dead at the side of the road, crossing the other side to go serve and meet Jesus in the temple, right, to stay clean and meet him there. And then the Levite, the same, second person in the story, sees the guy dying, very intentionally crosses to the other side of the road, going to keep clean because he's going to go see Jesus in the temple, go meet God in the temple, right? And the third guy is who? He's the Samaritan. Very powerful story when you think about it, because the Samaritan is the one that gets off his horse. His heart, he says in the story, is moved with compassion. He gets off his animal and begins to nurse and minister to this man who's a stranger. He doesn't know him. He just knows, right, as neighbor. And so he does that, brings him to the inn, you know the story, pays the innkeeper, right? All this stuff for a person that's a complete stranger. And Jesus says, you ask me who's your neighbor? Well, you tell me who was neighbor to that man. And the guy kind of reluctantly offers back, well, the one that showed him mercy, he was neighbor. So Jesus says, go and do likewise. As I say, you know the story. It's a great story, and certainly at the surface level, it fits what we do at Catholic Charities. We literally have people who are dying that are in our care sometimes. We have outreach that meets people in the desert and so forth. All kinds of very dramatic things. But what we really love about it is, who's the hero of the story? It's that Samaritan. Jesus is kind of saying in this story, it's kind of a stick in the eye to people like me that are insiders in the church, born and raised Catholic, master's in theology degree, been serving in the church, all that stuff. And it's kind of a stick in my eye to remind me, Jesus isn't paying attention to what jersey I've got on, what church I belong to formally, right? He's really looking at the heart. That's like the big motivating call that Catholic Charities brings in the world, because as I say, you don't have to be Catholic to serve here. You don't have to be Catholic to be served. We're people who are moved with compassion, and we want to be neighbor. We want to see our neighbor. So we see the world as brother, sister, neighbor. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's such a powerful story when you're inside Catholic Charities, because we see it, we live it. So that's what I wanted to share with you about kind of who we are. We meet people in crisis, at risk, they're vulnerable. We move them from stable to ideally thriving. This takes all sorts of forms. I'm going to pass it now to Steve, who's going to talk more specifically about housing. Give us about half a second here while we do the mic change.
Well, thank you all for being here and for engaging us in a conversation about such an important topic. I don't know if Paul mentioned to you, but Catholic Charities was created over 91 years ago in Phoenix, when the need became apparent that there are problems within the city of Phoenix that we need to address. And over time, our board added to that one singular issue, and this had to deal with troubled youth, 22 programs. But in 2010, our board had a board strategic meeting, and what they realized was a theme throughout those 22 programs was the need for stable, affordable housing. And so they looked around and saw an opportunity with very few nonprofits like Catholic Charities involved in housing production to get engaged. And so we created a housing nonprofit arm called Housing for Hope in 2011. And I came on to help in this endeavor. And in a moment, I'll show you some of the results that we've been able to accomplish with the Lord's help. He's blessed us tremendously to be able to do this work. And we'd like to be able to do that with all of you. What I want to do is share a little bit about our approach and how this works, if you can bear with me. But our goal when we started this was 1,000 units. And not to put any pressure on all of you, but if we do a project with you, you actually will help us achieve that goal. So you'll be part of that celebration of hitting that 1,000 mark if you work with us. So not any pressure. But one of the things that we saw in doing housing, and when you think about social services, you have an office. You have like the St. Vincent de Paul group that meets here on your campus, but people come to that office. But instead, wouldn't it be nice if we go to where the people live? And one of the reasons we do housing is you have an audience of individuals who we could bring the services directly to. Now, we don't force it upon them. It's voluntary. But when you come on site and get to know people and engage people, you're creating a community. And in that community, we support one another. And so that's another reason why Catholic Charities, we do this work. We're providing an affordable home, but we're also creating a community where people really become neighbors and care for one another and support one another. And that's a huge part of why we do this work. When we talk about affordable housing, and Father Ignatius mentioned workforce housing, it's people between what we call 30 and 60% of the median area income. It's sort of the notch below the market. It's the working families and individuals that can't afford what the market is producing. So our government has created some vehicles for us to produce housing that will allow us to serve that group that should be served, but the market can't do it. So those are the folks that we are working with. This is permanent housing. Catholic Charities has homeless shelters, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're not proposing developing a homeless shelter. This is permanent, regular apartments like you would see in your community. You wouldn't know the difference based on the work that we do. It's permanent. People can live there as long as they want, as long as they abide by the lease. There is an annual lease. A measure of determining whether or not we are creating a community that people want to live in is, do they renew with us after the first year? So our goal is 85%. We actually are at 90% renewal rate. So people want to stay in the communities that we create. It's supportive. We actually will facilitate having staff on site that will do these engagement activities and help them, if they have needs, find ways to meet those needs. That's a big part of what we do with the communities that we create. So how do we finance these things? It'd be great if we were all independently wealthy and could just pay for this stuff, but we're not. So as I mentioned, the government created some vehicles for us to use. And the principal vehicle is what's called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. I'm not going to even try to explain it to you, but it's a way to incentivize investors to invest in this kind of work to pay for the projects. And in return, they get credits, they get a way to write this off of tax liability, and it's a great way to produce affordable housing. This program has existed for 30 years. And it's been audited by the General Accounting Office of Congress, and they've said that it's the most successful program ever created by Congress. So it's a program that's been there, it's going to be there, highly successful, and we've been able to tap into that to do these projects. So the projects pay for themselves. It's not like we're developers and going to be coming to you asking for money. We're not going to do that. We're going to be able to garner the resources to pay for the production and the operation of these housing units. What we do need is land. That is probably the scarcest commodity when you're trying to do what we do. And so engaging and having a relationship, partnership with the church where you provide the land for us to do this is huge. And you wouldn't be selling the land to us. It would be a long-term lease. And there would be some financial gain from leasing the land to us, working with us on this project. So that's sort of how the financing works without getting into too many details. I want to make sure that you all understand risk because it's very important to our board. As a nonprofit, we do not want to engage in risk unless we absolutely have to. And so we do everything possible to minimize risk and to make sure that these projects are viable. When you start construction, you'll finish construction. And when you open the doors, you're going to keep them open for long term. That's the approach that we've taken. A lot of times, we will bring in a for-profit developer to partner with us. These are developers we've worked with that we trust. If we do that with your project, rest assured, they're working with us, helping us, but they're not calling the shots, we are. This would ultimately be our project, working with the parish. We call the shots. We ultimately own the project, and so it still will be a Catholic Charities project, even though you may be hearing about a for-profit developer involved with the work that we do. I'm not going to go through all these projects, but I want to show you. These are the projects we've done since we created the organization in 2011. You can see it's 16 projects. Most of them are in Phoenix. However, we've been able to branch out now into Page and Kingman because unfortunately, a lot of the resources are in the metro area. But we've been working hard to try to position more resources to the rural areas. And we think that there is a future to try to get some of these resources up to communities like Sedona. These acronyms on the end of each one of these projects are those resources that we've tapped into. But you can see it's a variety of projects. We usually name projects after trees because it's a great image of what we're trying to do for the people living there, create roots, grow big and strong, produce good fruit. But we have some smaller projects that we've named after saints because I realized, well, we're going to run out of trees eventually. So we've got to have, if we're going to hit that 1,000 mark or keep going, we got to keep with the theme. So we have smaller projects. The line is, I think, 20 units. So if it's 20 units or less, it's named after a saint. 20 units or more, it's named after a tree. So we look forward to whatever we come up with for this particular project. Move the, there you go. And there are some pictures of some of the projects that we've done below. All right, well, let me get to what we think we could do here on your property. Oop. I'm not going to go on that one. There. Now, keep in mind, we don't really have a project yet, but we do have to start with some kind of layout to see if a project is even possible on your land. So that's what this is. To be able to financially make these projects work, they have to be between 60 units, and in this case, it would be 80 units, because our architect who looked at your site looked at the possible zoning that we could get with the city. They think that we could fit at least 84 apartments on there. I'm not suggesting it's going to be 84, but it has to be at least 60 to make the financial numbers work. But we could max out 84 apartments. In this drawing, it would be 48 one-bedrooms, 24 two-bedrooms, 12 three-bedrooms, two-story configuration. I know height is a sensitive issue here, so we would work within those parameters to not obstruct views. So we wouldn't go any higher than 2 stories. And there'd be plenty of room on site for parking, so it would not interfere with parking at the church. So it would be a self-contained community in the corner of your church property that the church has identified for us to take a look at. So that is what we are contemplating. And again, this is by no means a finished product or done deal. We hope to work with many of you on what this thing should look like, how big it should be, what kind of amenities, those sorts of things. But in closing, I just want to bring up the timeline. We obviously have to continue to work with the diocese for approval, work with the city on the rezoning that will be necessary for your property. The application for these resources typically is in April of every year. It's highly competitive. We, as a nonprofit, we compete with for-profit developers. But again, as I've shown you, we've been able to compete with the big boys, I call them, to get these things accomplished. The state typically funds about 8 to 10 projects a year. So for every 3 applications, one gets funded. They have guaranteed that at least 3 projects in the rural areas get funded, but they have to be in different counties. So in this case, it would be Yavapai County. So we could, as early as April of 2006, apply. Hope to get funded. If we get funded, we know by June, and then we close on all the financials of doing what we need to do by March, and we can get underway in April. And conceivably, it could be done by the summer of 2028. These things stay affordable for a minimum of 40 years. We have to agree to that. But I can tell you, as Catholic Charities, it's for as long as we can make it. So that's just the minimum. If we do not get funded in 26, we just resubmit it and try again. It's just sort of like the lottery. You don't win if you don't play. That's kind of how it works. I can tell you that probably if we don't win in 26, reapply in 27, at some point it will get funded. But I can tell you there's a lot of support for housing in Sedona. I'm hearing it not just from your local officials here, but from legislators, even the governor's office. I've heard would love to be able to support a project in Sedona. So I think our chances would be good. But again, I just want to warn you, it's a competition. So with that, Father, I'll just turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Steve and Paul, for introducing this a little bit more to everyone here. I want to share with you a few things, especially maybe for our parishioners. You could ask the question, why would we want to do this? Why is this good for the parish? Why does St. John Vianney Parish want to do this? And there's probably many reasons you could give. Some of the reasons that I think of right away is that there is a need here in Sedona for workforce housing, for affordable housing. It's interesting when you look at some of the projects in Sedona that claim to be affordable housing, and they end up not being affordable housing. Because even though it's apartments, they have to choose, they end up, it ends up being market price for the rent. So they end up charging market price, and market price ends up being $2,000 a month, and that's not affordable for a certain group of people. And so Catholic Charities, the unique thing about them is they build these apartments, and then they are affordable, and they guarantee that they're going to be affordable, and because the rent ends up being quite a bit less than the market rate. So I think that's very unique, and I think here in our city that this is a big need that's not going away. And we have many people who come into the city every day to serve us in various ways, especially in the restaurants and hotels, and then they don't have housing here. And so we have an opportunity to meet that need. It's also just our Catholic values. We talk about being Catholic and what it means to be Catholic, and sometimes we're able to show that. Other times, maybe it's more difficult to do that, but this is an opportunity to really live out our faith as Catholics. And housing in general is a basic human need, and it speaks to the dignity of the human person that individuals, families, couples would have housing. It strikes right at the heart of what it means to be a person, the dignity of the person, and it also connects to the corporal work of mercy, sheltering those who don't have homes. And so I think in many ways it's very connected to who we are as Catholics. I'm here at St. John Vianney. We're in a unique situation being in Sedona. As more homes get bought and turned into Airbnbs, less people actually live in Sedona. So our population is not going up, it's going down. The actual population of people that live in Sedona. And most likely that's going to continue for a while. So there's actually less homes in Sedona that people are living in as residents. And in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, as a parish, that's going to be a challenge for us because we're now have less people living in Sedona. And I think just again, maybe the longevity of the parish, this helps with that because not just rich people can live in Sedona now. Others can live in Sedona and be part of this parish in a way maybe that they're not able to right now. And so I think it actually stabilizes the parish. And it is true that part of this is also a long-term lease with Catholic Charities that would benefit the parish financially, and that would be a blessing for us. We would most likely put that money towards the Healing and Retreat Center that we're also looking to build in the future. I just have two more reasons. The other one is just evangelization. Again, we exist here to spread the gospel, to not just be insular, but to actually go out into all the world and spread the gospel. And partnering with Catholic Charities in this way would allow us to do that in a way we haven't before. I could see there being a Bible study, over at this new housing here on our campus. And there's really a variety of things we could offer the residents there, and generally Catholic Charities would be very much for that. Parish events. My hope would be over time that more people would join our parish, and that some of them would be living in this housing, and it would make it easier to evangelize. Now we would have to learn how to do that maybe in some new ways, but that would be good for us. And finally, the last reason that I have tonight is we do have plans to build a healing and retreat center, and in order to do that, most likely we would need to rezone our property. In order to do housing, for sure we would need to rezone. And if we're doing affordable housing, the city of Sedona is going to engage with us more because we know that they want affordable housing. And Catholic Charities has a really good reputation in this regard, and so it opens the door for all that we want to do. And it opens the door to a conversation with the city that I hope could go faster, that I hope could be more of a partnership instead of maybe confrontational. And I think this project, again, would allow for that in a way that wouldn't happen otherwise. So the way I think of life in general is we don't do things for just one reason. Normally, any kind of important decision, we have multiple reasons why we would do it. And I think all of these reasons are important and worthwhile and worthy. And these are really just some of the reasons why we would do it. I want to share one last thing, which I think is important, is that if we went forward with this workforce housing here at St. John Vianney, there would be a board that would help govern the relationship between Catholic Charities and the parish. The Catholic Charities wants to have a good relationship with a Catholic parish because they are a Catholic nonprofit just like us. A lot of their funding comes from the diocese. A lot of the funding comes from us when we contribute to the CDA. And they want to have really good relationships with parishes. And we want to have a say in the long-term success of a project like this. And so there would be opportunity for some of you to be on a board that would help ensure that the parish has representation and that there's a conversation that's ongoing to address any issues that come up. And so that would be an important thing. Without that safeguard, it would be hard to really make this work. But that's already built in. So those are just a few of my thoughts this evening in regards to why we would want to do this. We didn't have as many testimonies as we wanted tonight, but Richard, if you're interested, you are more than welcome to give a testimony. A group of us went to Phoenix to see the housing in Phoenix, and we saw 3 different housing developments in Phoenix. Raymond went, Richard went, I went, Deacon Dennis went, and a number of us went. There's about 15 of us. And I think, at least my perception was, maybe some of us were a little more skeptical than others going into it. But by the end of the day, we were much more on board and just encouraged by what we saw. One of the things that's unique about Catholic Charities is they're not just looking to build housing and walk away. That's not what they do. They're really looking to support the people who are going to be in this housing. So at one of the housing developments, we saw, a big center there that helps with after-school care, because that was a need for that community. And I would see Catholic Charities partnering with St. Vincent de Paul and the parish, and really the goal of all of that is to promote and encourage and support a thriving community. And even in the way that they built some of the housing in Phoenix, there was a large common area that it was clear to me that was intentional to help foster a real community. That's what they're looking to do. That's why 90% of the people stay. At least that's one of the reasons, because they're experiencing a real community. And in a lot of apartment complexes, that may not really be the case. That might not even be a goal of the apartment complex. But with Catholic Charities, it's a huge goal. And in some ways, I don't mean to speak for you, but you probably wouldn't want to do housing otherwise. Building the community is almost just as much as important as building the housing itself. And so that was my experience. Ramy, do you want to share a little bit? And Richard, I don't know if you're interested, but you could share as well if you want to.
Yeah, so it was wonderful to have an opportunity to go down and actually see the housing for ourselves. It's kind of obvious, like, is this going to work? Oh wait, they already do it, and it does work. So let's go check it out. And it was beautiful. I was really struck with how beautiful it was. Really gorgeous units, gorgeous grounds. And also, just to reiterate what Father said, I was really impressed with the cultivation of a community. that it's someplace not just where somebody's just going to sleep at night, you know. There's community rooms, there's playgrounds. It's really wonderful. And I just want to say on a personal level, you know, I lived in Los Angeles for a long time, and I don't know if you know, but that's a pretty expensive place to live too. And it is frustrating when you're working really hard and you're having trouble paying rent. So it's just great that Catholic Charities has this program that they do. And as a Catholic, it's so exciting that we're going to be able to provide this need. We're going to fill this need in our community because that's what we do as Catholics, right? That's what we're supposed to do. So we're going to get to live out our faith in this way, which is really wonderful, and continue our Catholic tradition of filling these needs in the community. So, Richard, I'll pass it on to you.
Obviously, looking towards the development of the parish campus now for about 3 years. And we have had a real challenge in looking for partners who could actually help us create. And we've tried really hard. Heartland of Americas, we took a look at the elderly component of the parish. The value that really comes, I think, from Catholic Charities is the idea of a Catholic community fostering a community. And what we saw down in Phoenix was obviously not just the values being expressed, but also, I mean, good management is essential to running a good community. And what really wasn't highlighted in the presentation is that they've really thoughtfully identified the population that works hard, family-based, and often struggles to get that first foothold. But when they bring them in, it's a very competitive process. They carefully check the folks who are going to be there for criminal records and all the documentation you would expect. They then ensure that the campus that they create, that community, is of value to both the community and to the investors. So they do monthly checks on each one of these families as they live. They provide a community closet there where the cleaning supplies and the food supplies, when you run out at that last few days, are there to sustain it. And by the on-site presence, they really do ensure that you knit together those folks into a very viable community. And we obviously have a variety of elements inside our parish. Families, the elderly, the workers, the retirees. And when you take a look at what Catholic Charities is in a number of their developments, it's not just this young working family, but right down the street, in fact, across the street, is something where they have a space for an elderly group of individuals. And they, like Sedona Winds, they run them over to the various facilities and all and support them. So this step we're looking at, I think with Catholic Charities, puts the first footprint in, but perhaps not the last footprint as we look at the needs of the parish in creating a long-term community. So I think, I mean, it's a quality set of facilities. And like the city of Phoenix asked that one set be very large and very boxy and very urban. But others look very much more like something that you'd expect to see here on a side street in Sedona. So I think you can see the ability to manage a process to build a community, integrate it into the existing community, and then sustain it over a period that, unfortunately, I think for a lot of the Sedona projects that we see underway, it's all about creating the living facility. I mean, the walls, the plumbing, etc. But what happens on morning number 2 when something goes wrong? Who's going to provide the integrated support? And how do you grow that from a place where you've got 63 individuals living into a community that's part of a larger community? I mean, I think if you live in Sedona or even the village of Oak Creek, I mean, the reality is short-term rentals has obviously increased the value of your property. But when, say, 9 or 10 out of the 13 properties on your street is now a short-term rental, you no longer live in a community. You live in a hotel. And you just happen to be the only permanent member of the hotel. So by bringing in an example of a group that can help create value in property, value in management, and value in community, I think we have something that's different. And I think that might well give Sedona a different view of why you have Catholics and why the community of St. John Vianney Parish is so important for the larger community. Well, that's my statement.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ravi. We are going to shift gears a little bit now. I haven't mentioned it quite yet, but it's on your agendas. I want to just thank the Northern Arizona Interfaith Council for being here tonight. They're helping us facilitate, especially the small groups, which we're about to have. And I also want to thank Roxana Cardiel for being here as well. And we've had a couple meetings with her the last couple of weeks, and I think this next part is something, the fruit of that. It's going to help us to have some discussion and then some question and answers. So I'm going to pass it to Roxana, and she'll direct us from here.
It's so nice to be here with you today. So again, Northern Arizona Interfaith Council, and a huge part of what we do is organize for the common good. That means that everything we do is very much about building community. We want to build community, and one way to do that is to have ways to engage with each other. And what things that we call house meetings, which are very much conversations. So what we want to do is to get everyone into 25-minute conversations with our facilitators. I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. We have Adrian, and we have Lee, and we have Elsie, and then we have Leah back here as well. I'll be facilitating the conversation myself. I believe it was so what we want to do in these conversations is to ask you a few questions. The first one is, what do you see as the benefits of building such a project? The second one is, what concerns do you have? And you'll have these handouts in your groups, so be aware of that. And then what questions do you have, right? What we ask in these conversations is that this not be a space for debate. We're not interested in that. We're not interested in hearing what you might want to complain about. We want to hear these things, and then we're going to get them out to everyone. We want to hear what questions do you have. We want to hear, when we get you into the groups, you're all going to have one of these. And as we're doing all this, it's not about theory or the abstract of things as they should be. It's about why these things are important to you, tangibly, concretely. So then that means that the facilitator wants to make sure that every single one of you has a chance to participate.
There's a couple questions that Paul's going to answer in regards to how this is financed and what a rating list looks like.
Okay, well, the question is, how are these financed? I mentioned previously that these are resources from the federal government. So we compete, get these resources from the federal government, and that pays for the project. So all the costs associated with building this are provided from the government, essentially. So that's how it's done. Does that answer the question? So because it's funded by the government, we have to follow what's called the Fair Housing Law. And the Fair Housing Law makes it clear that you cannot discriminate against anyone for age, sex, religion, those sorts of qualifications. And so you can't just say it's for certain types of people. You have to open it up to everyone. The qualifying factor is income. So as long as they meet the income requirements and can afford to live there and pass the background check, they make it on the list. And so it's first come, first serve. So once we get an application, we qualify them, they go on the list. Next person comes in, we qualify them, they go on the list. So it's basically in order as we receive them, is how it works. Once we have filled up the apartment community, there's a waiting list that's maintained. And the waiting list is basically in order when it's received. Now, we have, with some of our communities, let it be known to our programs and partners a couple of weeks before the public knows that we're getting ready to lease. And so we could do that here too. We could let some of our partners know ahead of the public that, hey, let folks know if they need housing, come apply. And that's sort of how we try to get ahead of just anyone coming to the door, is do that pre-leasing with folks that we know. Again, we still follow fair housing law, but that's generally how it works. Does that answer those questions?
You want to say something about you have to stay in the limits.
Yeah, basically, you have to afford the rent, but you have to be under a certain income level. If you ever get to the point where you're over that income level, we won't kick you out right away. You can stay another year, so you have another year to either reduce your income. Some people will do that because they want to stay, which is perfectly okay. Or you find another place within a year.
This is a good one. I don't know if you can answer this, but
Yeah, have any projects passed the 15-year limit, what happens? This 15-year issue is kind of complicated. So it's kind of hard to explain, but this program involves investors. The investors give you the money to build it. They in turn have the ability to write off some of their income tax for 15 years. Once that 15-year period ends, they're gone. And then we step in and now own it outright. So I think the question is, has that happened yet? Our first project, this will happen in 2028. So it hasn't happened for us yet. But I can tell you, it's happened over the country. Like I said, this program's been around for 30 years. So it's written up front how that will happen. And it's built in that we have that right to step in and take out the investors and no one else does. So it's pretty much guaranteed it'll happen that way. But we have not done it yet. Our first property is 2028.
could the parish have second right?
The parish can have second right. If you want to become a landlord and own it, and deal with the nice government compliance reports, sure.
Good. Okay. I think we're kind of going to finish out. Again, we will get you the rest of the questions, some answers to the rest of the questions. I'm honored to thank everyone for being here tonight. We will do this again as we go forward. And so there is an opportunity to sign up to get information on that and to stay connected to this, how it develops. And at least for my part, as the pastor here, I will be continuing to pray about this, and by the end of the month, I expect to make a decision, and that also implies, or we'll see if Catholic Charities also wants to keep going forward, but that's kind of where we are with this discernment. So if there's parishioners who want to talk to me more about that, feel free to do so. We'll just close with a prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we ask your blessing upon us this night. Bless us as we travel home. Keep us safe. We also ask that you bless the parish's discernment in regards to whether to pursue this with Catholic Charities. We ask that you bless Catholic Charities and all that they're doing, especially here in the state of Arizona. And may Almighty God bless you, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.